Hello, this is Debbie. Welcome to Living the Hobby Farm Dream. Today we're going to be doing podcast episode number 16, and we hope that you'll follow along on our show on Spotify. It really helps when you follow along, and also on YouTube. Our subject today on episode 16 is diseases and health issues of your chickens. And so we hope that you'll listen in and learn something new possibly today that you didn't know when you got chickens. The first disease that we wanted to talk about a little bit today was called Marek's disease. And what it is, it's a highly contagious viral disease, and it comes in young birds. It can cause tumors and paralysis in the bird. And the best prevention is to get them vaccinated. And that is done when they're little babies, baby chicks, just a day or so old. We like to go with reputable breeders when we get our baby chicks, and that way we can prevent this Marek's disease with a vaccination. This Marek's disease that we said causes tumors and paralysis is prevalent in the United States with the poultry community. So it's important that you take care of this when you can, when they're young, because you don't want to have this paralysis or tumors with your baby chicks. And you don't want it passing on to the other chicks that you have. Good thing is that the vaccination is very helpful with this, and it's easy to do. You just have it done when they're babies. Second thing we're going to talk about is avian influenza, which is bird flu. And it's a fatal virus that is carried by wild birds, and you'll have sudden death, purple discoloration of the combs or the wattles, and decreased egg production and respiratory distress. You need to keep the wild birds out of your coop, which is very difficult. I know where we live, and we have decided that we're going to start feeding them some of their food outside the coop so that they don't attract as many birds into the coop. We also have some openings on our coop that are quite large, and so we want to make those so that the chickens can get out in the morning and come back in the evening, but that a lot of birds are not coming in throughout the day to eat their food, and that's what attracts them into the cage. The avian bird flu rarely passes on to humans, but it is very serious for your birds. If you feel like your bird might have this bird flu, you need to isolate them and contact your Department of Agriculture in your state to report it. They will need to be immediately isolated from the other birds until you can find out what's going on. If you suspect this at all, you should not sell any of your eggs anymore. You should not sell any of your birds because it's very contagious and can be passed to other animals. The third thing that we want to talk about today on our podcast was salmonellosis, which is salmonella. The chickens can carry the salmonella without symptoms. The symptoms they do have, if they have it, they can cause diarrhea and weakness. The health risk to humans also by handling the chickens. For a human, the symptoms would be a fever and stomach cramps. The main thing that you can do for this is to always make sure that you wash your hands and your children's hands thoroughly after handling chickens. Anyone that's in the chicken coop handling the eggs or the chickens needs to wash their hands. And make sure you wash their hands with warm water and lots of soap. Also, do not eat the raw eggs because they also carry salmonella, and you're more likely to get it from raw eggs. The fourth issue that chickens have, and especially here where we live where it's very hot, is heat stress and respiratory issues. We have extreme temperatures here in the spring and summer, sometimes up into the 115 or more. Because of that, the chickens here in where we live in Arizona are prone to heat stroke and dehydration. So you need to make sure that there's always plenty of cool water around, clean, cool water. Also, we put misting systems in our chicken coop and around our farm so that the chickens can get out of the heat and cool down. And that makes the ground softer and cooler for them. Also, they can also, where it's very, very dusty here, where we live in the desert, they can also have respiratory infections. Chickens can get from the dust. And so dusty and humid coops are some of the worst. That's something that you need to do if you have chickens, is to make sure you clean the coop often. We try to clean it at least once a week, and you can do it more if you have more chickens, but make sure you have it clean shavings and clean grass and whatever that you put in there for your chickens, because the more dust in there, then the worse their respiratory infections can be. Also provide lots of shade around our property. We have trees, we have bushes, we have the coop, we have the pens of our other bigger animals, which also have misting systems. The chickens like to spend a lot of time in the bigger stalls where they can have more airflow and they can have the misters on so that they can stay cool. So make sure that you have lots of shade and places where your chickens can go to get out of the warm sun in the summer. kind of general guidelines to watch for your chickens to make sure that they're healthy is watch them, and if they're lethargic, like they're hardly moving around or doing their normal activities, or if they're isolated by themselves, either in the coop or in your yard. If they're picked on by other chickens and they're not eating, if they're not laying eggs, like, and they're usually laying eggs, you just have to observe them, observe their combs and wattles. If they're a healthy color, you can check their eyes to see if they're clear and alert. And some ideas also to keep your animals as healthy as possible, your chickens, is to make sure that they have a clean coop on a weekly basis. Also, like we said, remove the infected bird to isolation and monitor, make sure they're not getting picked on. Another thing to do throughout the year is to do deworming, which you can do with lots of different products. There's some that you can get at your local feed store. There are some natural ones that have to do with seasonings and chili powder, things that help with the deworming. And some of those spices are really, really good for them and keep them healthy. Another thing is to contact your vet. Many vets, like in our area, will come out and see your chickens if they're acting sick. You can treat them yourself. There's a lot online that you can learn about, and through books you can learn about chickens and how to treat them for minor ailments. If it's something more serious, then you may have to call a vet to bring your chicken in or have them come out to your property to check on your chicken and find out what's going on. Many times with our chickens, sometimes we don't really notice them acting up, and then the next day they've passed away. So you have to really keep an eye on them and check on them, count your chickens, make sure they're all there, look at them, pick them up throughout the weeks to make sure that they're doing okay. And you can tell a lot about them just by observing them. Again, the Marek's disease is something you can take care of right when they're little, and so make sure that you do that. And the influenza bird flu is something that we can try to keep the wild birds out of their cage, and that will be helpful in keeping them safe from the bird flu as much as you possibly can. And the salmonella, we also just need to remember to always wash our hands well with warm water and soap to keep us and our children and our families and those who visit our farm safe from salmonella, and make sure that we cook the eggs before we eat them. And also that when we handle the raw chicken, if you're doing meat chickens, that you make sure you wash your hands with soapy water so that we don't spread salmonella to ourselves or to the people in our family. Also making sure that there's plenty of shade and water and misting system here to keep your chickens cool so that they will be able to survive the warm summers. And clean your coop often to keep the dust down and so that they won't get respiratory problems. There are other chicken diseases and things that can happen to your chickens, but we just want to talk about those 4 main ones that are common in where we live. And there are some others, if you live in a colder climate, that might affect your chicken differently. So make sure that you keep an eye on your chicken and look at them often. If you're really familiar with your flock, you can tell right away which ones are not feeling well. If you clean their cage often, and if you watch them and make sure they have the proper food and nutrition and water and the things that they need, the deworming a couple times a year, then you'll have a healthier flock. Everyone's goal is to make sure our chickens are healthy. We want our animals to be able to give us eggs, and that we want them to lead a healthy, happy life. Our next episode will be episode 17, and so we hope you'll tune in. If you could please follow our show on Spotify, it really helps, and also on YouTube. So give it a listen. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.